Hey everyone, it's the Our Shawn. Welcome to another edition of the McBride Attorney Show. We've got Anessa Santos joining us today. We're going to be talking about hidden IP value. So Anessa is a lawyer like myself who does several different things, but she works with people on capital raise. She works with them on raising and growing their businesses. She also works with them on their IP concerns and what's happening there. And one thing that comes up a lot, and Anessa spends more time on the IP side than I do, but a lot of companies just don't realize what's happening with their intellectual property, or IP for shorthand. Usually there's a lot of value there. And for startup companies, you got to get that value expressed to your investors. You got to have them understand what's there, what you can capitalize on, what potentially investors might want to take advantage of, what an acquirer might want later. But for a lot of other companies, if you're not that kind of startup, if you're just an operating company, up and running, maybe a family business, maybe an established company, you probably have IP within your company that has value that an acquirer would want, that you should be protecting, because that may be part of your exit. And for a lot of companies, uncovering that is a challenge. We're going to dive into that today. So we're looking forward to getting Anessa's expertise here. For those of you who don't tune in as often, I'm the Our Shawn. I'm a corporate lawyer by training. I help people with ownership and control of their business. So that might be a merger, a capital raise, partnership agreement, contract negotiation. I also do a lot of speaking about the future of business. So I cover a variety of topics in that area. And I do these YouTube shows like Future Done Right, and now the McBride Attorney Show, which dives more on legal issues to help bring you, the business owners and the responsible parties in business, into the fold so you can make better decisions. That's always our goal. In that connection, we'd love your comments. So wherever you're watching, if it's Our Shawn McBride Fans and Audience at Facebook, McBride Attorney Show on YouTube, if it's one of our LinkedIn feeds, wherever you're seeing this, drop your comments. Let us know what you're learning, but also let us know what challenges you have, because we can tailor content to that. As a reminder, we don't do investment advice on the show. We don't do legal advice on that show. For that stuff, talk to your own advisor. Everything here is just for your education. So, Anessa, welcome to the show. Let's talk a little bit about hidden IP, so hidden intellectual property. This happens a lot. What are some examples of what you see in your practice as you're working with companies? Where they have IP that maybe they're not thinking about or they don't realize?
It's really interesting that you would ask me that, because folks, if you're watching, what you need to understand is that Shawn doesn't really give me much warning. He's just like, I'm like, what are we talking about today, Shawn, or tomorrow? And he's like, IP. And I'm like, okay. So, this just kind of happens off the cuff, no preparation whatsoever. So it's really wild that Shawn asked me like that, because as he was going through the intro, I was remembering, I'm kidding you not, the perfect example. Right? Something happened to me years ago before I moved from Naples to Orlando. Folks, I live in Florida. I spent most of my time in Florida and Naples. And then just a couple years ago, I moved to Orlando, and that's how I met Shawn. Mm-hmm. But when I was in Naples, I had a beautiful home. It was 10 minutes from the beach. Oh my gosh, I miss it so much. I had this great little backyard inside this little community, and it had a pool, right? But it was a saltwater pool. And I had no idea. I'd never owned a pool before, because I'm originally from backwoods Ohio, right? We don't really have in-ground pools up there very often. And so I was all excited. I wanted this saltwater pool. It'd maybe be healthier than chlorinated pools, but there are all of these problems with attending and maintaining a saltwater pool that I never knew about. So I actually went through multiple pool companies that really screwed things up badly. Like, for example, my husband's from Peru. I went on a trip in Peru. I came back, half my pool was empty. Like, I am not kidding you. The pool was half empty. Like, oh my God, what happened? So the pool company had opened a service valve, or it's opened like an extra valve, and all the water had been draining out of the pool until it got below the little exit valve point. Yeah. And because it's salt water, salt kills soil fertility. So all my grass, on that, for feet and feet and feet of grass. And I'm in this homeowners association, and they've got non-lotsies, and they're citing me for huge swaths of dead grass and everything. And it was the pool company's fault. So I went through multiple pool companies, finally found a genius pool company, and the sun rose and set on them, and they were my guys, and that was the company that I worked with. Some years later, I moved to Orlando. When I moved to Orlando, something happened with my pool. My beloved pool company was screwing up my pool. Yep. I called the guys. I got to talk to a gentleman who apparently was new with the company, and it just wasn't working out. And so I'd have my neighbors check on the pool for me, and it was like, no, this is a problem. And they'd send me pictures, and it was full of debris. And at one point it was like lime green, and it was just really awful. And then you know what? I called, like, instead of calling the guy directly, I called like the company office, and the recording on the voicemail sounded different.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, yeah, you know what I'm going to say. You know what I'm going to say? Somebody bought the company.
Yep.
The guy that I've been talking to on the phone bought the company. He lied to me.
Yep.
And he had, basically he'd said he was a new employee. Yeah, I get it. It wasn't a technical lie. He was an employee of his own company. He had bought my beloved pool company, but he sucked.
Yep.
And so where's the intellectual property in all of this? I want everybody to be like paying a lot of attention, because here's the thing. I had associated excellence with the brand of that pool company. I had associated specialization with that pool company because I knew that they could work with saltwater equipment. I had provided multiple recommendations to my neighbors and my friends in the areas of Naples, right? Because I'm like, they're amazing. They'd been to my house. They had seen my pool. They wanted to make sure they had a good pool company, because let me tell you, it costs thousands if you have a bad one, right? Yeah. So now we've got branding. We've got goodwill. We have customer lists, right? I was a customer, so when the new owner came in, he bought the name, he bought the branding, he bought the goodwill, he bought the customer list. Me, I'm on the customer list. The goodwill means that they had done such a good job building up their reputation and their brand over the years that they were getting referrals, they were getting recommendations. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that control had shifted.
Yes.
So consequently, what did I do? Well, I fired the guy, right? And I'm like, crap, now what am I going to do? And I'm going to have to find somebody else, right, to maintain the pool. The house was on the market until I could get it to sell. And it was a total pain in the
place. Yes.
It was awful. And so there is a hidden intellectual property that folks don't necessarily think of. It was a small operation. Yep. It was a company that was run by a couple of brothers. Mm-hmm. And they had built it up into something nice. Yep. And so the value, so they didn't have some big mega mammoth multi-franchise operation going on, folks. This was a mom and pop shop. It was a small, closely held family business. But what they did well. And people in the community trusted their name, and they trusted their brand, and they associated that brand with quality, trustworthy work that could be depended on, especially in a pinch and during hurricane season. Right. And all that went to hell in a handbasket when this other idiot came in and bought the company and ran it that way. Well, where is he today? Is he successful? Is he still in business? Is he out of business? Did he get some competent help? I have no idea. Right. But that experience really damaged the value of the intellectual property for me. And it also, his incompetency damaged the value of the intellectual property that he purchased, because now his customer list was shrinking in size.
Yeah, but that brings up the core point. I mean, for so many businesses, your intellectual property is pretty simple. We can get into the complexity. We will a little bit here later, I'm sure. But for many, many businesses, there's tremendous value in just knowing who your customers are, having your customers call you, having your phone number, in their receipt records, having you in their phone for the pool company. Mm-hmm. Pool company A, when pool company B gets to retirement age, if pool company B has a good customer list and they have a ready base of customers, that's very tempting to pool company A, right? Because they can go acquire them and say, hey, well, I just
business, You turn the key, you walk in, and it's operational. So you're buying an existing operation. You're not building it from the ground up. And another hidden value of intellectual property in this particular business example is something called intellectual capital. Mm-hmm. Now, is that something that you've encountered, Shawn, in any of your previous businesses? This whole ethereal concept of intellectual capital, because not too many people talk about it.
No, let's run through it. I mean, I've heard the term before. Let's dive into it.
Sure, right. So intellectual capital is specific know-how, like is real specific industry know-how that makes you valuable in comparison to other companies. So like in this particular example, the know-how was a particular kind of saltwater pool system. That was the know-how. And this is opposed to the general, chemically operating pool system that's based on chlorine, right? So that's general know-how. But a saltwater system was a much narrower construct. And so being able to work this saltwater system, well, this is intellectual capital. Now, whether or not, the value of that in the scheme of servicing all of Southwest Florida, how valuable is it? Well, I don't know. It depends on how many saltwater pools. Are we seeing a trend towards saltwater pools? Do more expensive residences have saltwater pools as opposed to chlorine pools? I don't know. Those are questions that an acquirer of a business or even a seller of a business should be asking when they are thinking about valuing their intellectual property. Do not undervalue yourself as a manager, director, officer, employee. Do not undervalue yourself, because your specific knowledge and understanding of your trade or your business is valuable and it's worthy. We call that intellectual capital, and it's a kind of intellectual property.
Right, and we don't need to get deep about it, folks, but if you get into an acquisition situation, if you're the company that's sitting there and you're getting acquired, one of the things you're going to be talking about is, potentially is an earnout, right? So which is a fancy term for saying, the buyer wants to keep you around for a while for that intellectual capital. You got to be careful about how those things are worded and how they're structured, because a lot of times a significant part of your payout is tied to this earnout, which is tied to the performance of the company in the 2 or 3 years after you leave. And if they're not worded right, you could really lose some money. So be very careful. That's just an aside that's important, because this intellectual capital is important. Many buyers do want the seller people to stick around for a while so that they can have a comfortable transition to taking over the operation. They want this intellectual capital, but you got to make sure they actually pay for it in the end and pay for it the right way. So just a note to the wise out there to keep in touch with the earnout. If you start seeing that term pop up, make sure your lawyer is well aware of what the nuances of that is.
Right. No, Shawn's absolutely right. And Shawn has actually a lot more experience in mergers and acquisitions than I do. He did a lot more of that specific kind of work than I did. And, but I've been through it just, maybe 5 or 6 times, and as a shareholder, and I have been the victim of poorly worded earnout clauses, because then what would happen is the acquirer would just sit on it for like the earnout period, whether it was 2 years or 3 years, and they would kind of behave in bad faith or be like, oh, we're doing everything we can, but it just doesn't really want to work. And I'm like, that's bullcrap. And so basically it's a way for them to just kind of sit on the acquisition, sit on the intellectual property, so that they don't have to pay you during that earnout period. And then magically the company seems to be doing well so many years after, right? And whether or not you want to get involved in paying an attorney to go and sue them for that amount of money is another question. But Shawn is absolutely right. Heed his advice. If you're looking to sell your business, if you're looking to buy a business, be very careful about that earnout language. Make sure, I would suggest you might even want to make it mandatory payments, and that it not be tied to the success of the company going forward, because there's no requirement that they be successful, and you can't realistically make them even with a court order.
Right. There's usually too many things that the buyer can play with, right? They can play with the amount of funding the entity has. They can play with the employees. There's a lot of bills, a lot of levers they can pull to make it difficult. So warning there, that's a great takeaway for those of you that are thinking about selling at some point, is make sure you understand that earnout and how it's going to work. Also, make sure you understand that hidden IP. Let's dive a little more into that, Anessa. And I love this example of the pool company, because it's just a simple way. It works for the smaller businesses out there that don't have complex operations. You know who you are. It also works for the bigger businesses out there, because it's just a simple example. So back to the pool company. So you have a pool company, you're looking to sell. Usually it's going to be some type of multiple of your earnings multiplied by whatever the current industry multiple is. So, your pool company's making $1 million a year times 2.5 or 3 or whatever the number is for pool companies at that time. But the other thing you need to take into account is how does that all connect to your other intellectual property, right? So do you have, could that be expanded into a spa company, right? Because a spa company use the people who own pools to then sell spa services, right? And that may add some additional value to it. So you've really got to step back and look at the total value of your database, not just your income stream, but what can people do with it?
Amazon is the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are. So Amazon started out selling books online, digital versions of paper books.
Mm-hmm.
And well, they actually started selling paper books, and then they were selling digital versions of paper books. And then they got a really great, phenomenal government handout, and were able to expand into the other areas of wholesale and retail sales. And so when you think about what can I do with my brand, am I limited? I really want you to understand that you're not limited. However, having said that, if you are expanding your brand or your services or your intellectual property into other areas, then and you have registered, say, your logo or your name, which we call your trademark, if you've registered that either in your state or federally with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, in the process of registration in the Federal Trademark Office, the USPTO, you actually have to select what are called classifications.
Right.
And classifications determine what line of business that you're in, that your trademark is being used for. And so if you start using your trademark for other things that actually pop up in the definition of these other classifications, right, that you can actually, there's a book and you can open it and you can read them, then you need to go ahead and file an additional trademark to cover you for those new operations. And so I want to make sure that folks know that, sure, absolutely, you can expand as far and as wide as the planet goes. And I would encourage that if that's really what you want to do. But make sure that you take steps along the way to go ahead and file for that protection so that you're covered and that other people don't jump on the bandwagon. Like Victor's Little Secret is a great example of when another company popped up and they wanted to sort of play off of Victoria's Secret, the lingerie store. They were Victor's Little Secret. They did some things that were a little more racy and a little more adult than Victoria's Secret. And so, of course, there was a big lawsuit of misappropriation causing likelihood of confusion in the marketplace. And I know that Victor's Little Secret sounds totally different than Victoria's Secret, but the court decided that it was too similar, that there was confusion in the marketplace, and so they were prohibited from using that name in that context. And so it's important that you police what's going on with your intellectual property out there.
And we covered that on yesterday's edition of the Future Done Right show. So if you're tuning in and you're getting interested in intellectual property, you see the connection with your business, zoom back to YouTube, search me and Anessa Santos on intellectual property on the Future Done Right channel. You can see that other episode, or you can go to futuredoneright.com and pick up the link there. So that'll help you kind of get those things in order. And that makes an important point. The famous example is Delta Airlines and Delta Faucets, right? We got two huge companies both using the name Delta, but there is no brand confusion, right? You go to Home Depot and your faucet starts leaking, you don't cancel your airline flight. Or Delta Airlines loses your bag and you go rip your faucet.
I love that. Yeah, no, you're right. And they both use the name Delta, but nobody's confused, right?
Right.
But Victoria's Secret and Victor's Little Secret, people were thinking that maybe the companies were related. And Victoria's Secret was like, I don't want to be related to you. So that's literally what it was.
Right, but that tells you kind of how the courts draw the line. I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, you can't block out the word Delta from everybody. You can't block out the word secret from everybody, right? But you get an area that you own, and that's what this is all about. What Anessa is saying is go back periodically, make sure you own the areas you need to own because your business will go up over time, right?
Right, absolutely. And when it comes to sort of your trade secret intellectual property, which we defined yesterday, but you want to put some protective measures in place because, let's say, for example, one of your employees takes your customer, your client list, and they sell it to some other competing company, and you want to be able to sue them in court and stop them from using your customer list or get a no contact order so that this competing company cannot contact any of your companies or perform services for them because it was like corporate espionage, right? You can't get that protective order from the court unless you have shown that you have actually implemented meaningful and reasonable measures to protect that information as trade secret. And so we see that coming up in the way of our restrictive covenants, right? Our non-competes and our non-disclosures and our non-disparagement and all of those sorts of things, non-solicitation. And so I put that information on LinkedIn. I think it was maybe about a week ago, the 5 most common restrictive covenants. And so it's really important, folks, that when you're running your business, that you think about the value of your company, you identify it, and then you put in reasonable protections for your intellectual property so that you've got something to fall back on in case you need to ask the court for help.
Yeah, and it's always good to paper this stuff to make sure that you're clear with the employees. You're going to get some common law protections for your trade secrets and other stuff, but don't fall back on that. Make sure that everybody understands they can't go out and use your customer list after they leave your employ, right?
It's cheap, for heaven's sakes, people. Oh my goodness. Filing for trademark protection with the USPTO is totally affordable. And you might even be able to do it yourself. It depends on how diligent you are in running through. The USPTO actually has a series of videos that they produced for the everyday person to learn how to protect their intellectual property. Now, remind you that we're not getting involved in patents. Patents is a totally different area. Our conversation is mostly on copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, and the licensing of intellectual property. So patent protection is incredibly particular. You either A, have to file a patent on behalf of yourself, or B, you have to hire a patent bar attorney to actually file it for you. So like, I can't file people's patents because I'm not a member of the patent bar. Are you a member of the patent bar, Shawn?
I'm not. I don't have a science degree, so
They didn't tell me that when I applied to law school. Hey, by the way, you might have to go back and get yourself another degree if you want to be a patent lawyer at some point in the future.
Yeah, and there's people out there that are members of the patent bar that aren't lawyers, right? So you can become a member of the patent bar without being a full-fledged lawyer. So that's a very interesting area.
Yeah, it's kind of wonky that way. So folks, I can help you with your copyrights, your trademarks, your trade secrets. I can license the heck out of anything, but unfortunately I cannot help you file your patents. I'm not allowed.
So Anessa, great info again today. I think this really gave people a great primer on IP. I'd love to come back and talk about it again on a future edition of the show. But in the meantime, I know you have a wonderful LinkedIn feed. You mentioned it in the show. Why don't you tell folks how they can check out your great work, learn about you, and if they do have some IP work, maybe they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so look me up on my website, intellalaw.io, or feel free to check me out on LinkedIn. It's really the only social media outlet that I'm using these days, Anessa Santos on LinkedIn. And incidentally, Shawn, before we sign off for the day, I don't want to leave this topic that we wanted to discuss go untouched. And that is, typically intellectual property law holds that only human beings can be the author of creative or inventive works. So this begs the question, what about the intellectual property that's being generated by artificial intelligence, machine learning? Ellie the elephant in Singapore, I don't know where she is, right, but she's painting. And I think this is a really interesting subject matter because we're seeing a lot more creative works being authored by machine intelligence. And I actually have not read up on this topic. I don't know where we are. I've only just asked the question a few days ago when it came to mind, and I was like, oh my gosh, right? I didn't connect the dots until recently.
It's definitely going to be an emerging issue. Maybe we'll zoom back on that, as it starts to take the fold. But I expect you're right. It's like many emerging areas of the law. Cases are going to happen, things are going to happen, and then we're going to have to come up with answers. So that's just which is the way the law often works. Stuff happens, and then we figure it out.
I sit in my chair and I'm like, right, because I do a lot with blockchain, fintech. I'm doing more with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing. And I'm reading about like I just recently read how some artificial intelligence created, it was either in South Korea or Singapore, that it created a novel by reading all of the literary works and all of the works that have gotten literary awards. It wrote a totally new novel that, had it been authored by a human, would have been eligible for like a literary award. And I was like, okay, like a Pulitzer or something. I'm like, oh, this is like next level, folks.
Crazy, yes. But it's getting that good, So folks, a lot of issues. Come back and join us. check out the Future Done Right show, Future Done Right YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. Anessa's been a guest many times. Go watch those videos. Also, like the McBride Attorneys Law Show, which is newer. We're just building a subscriber base for that, but join us. We'll have more episodes with more people talking about legal issues that'll be important for your business. Check us out at McBrideAttorneys.com. Pat yourself on back for doing the hard work. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And Anessa, thanks for joining me again.
Thanks, Shawn. It's always a blast.
Yes.